Hello and welcome to the Dire Gentleman channel. My name is Gus Zagarella.
And I'm Henry Galley, and today we're here to discuss the latest episode of Helluva Boss, which is quickly becoming the Big Bang Theory of YouTube.
Yeah, see, here's the thing. If you know this channel, you know that we've covered Helluva Boss for a while in the past. Ever since its inception, there was a time that we were really rooting for this show. And then it kept being released, and the things that we initially liked about the show sort of fell away in favor of a series of persistent flaws, which we outlined in our last major video on the series, and are more present here in this episode than perhaps they've ever been.
Yeah, we're not going to waste too much of your time on this one. It's so funny because this show has really speedrun the kind of somnambulistic seasonal rot that it typically takes shows sort of 3 or 4 seasons to get into, when it just feels like they're going through the motions, playing the hits, giving us kind of dull, flattened versions of popular characters that they know the kind of die-hard, heavily parasocial fans will headcanon into some kind of interest or intrigue.
Yeah, I mean, no shade at all to Edward Bosco. You know, he does great work, talented guy. But in order to bring back the Stryker character, to just, write him into this episode without the Norman Reedus, it just feels like a complete lack of creative confidence, where it's like, well, we can't get this character back in his original voice actor, but let's write him in anyway, because we've got nothing else to do. Like, what else is there in terms of plot? Do we bring back the Cherubs? Do we bring back Dork? Do we deliberate further on the divorce plot line? It's just one of those things where speculating about this show has come to feel, it's just rough. And I don't even know if we're allowed to do it anymore, is the scary thing.
I've seen so many kind of bad excuses for why the show is like it is. I think I saw, Vivzy on Twitter say something like, oh, the show is meant to be watched as, all one thing when it's finished. And, given how, lame and meandering these episodes are, I think that would be an even worse way to experience this than just having it every few months.
It also doesn't make much sense when you really think about how episodic some of the entries are. Like, if episodes like Lululand and Spring Broken and Murder Family are not meant to be self-contained in some way, then I think I'm just confused about what the difference between screenplay and narrative is, man, honestly.
Yeah, I know. It takes a serious hit to our professionalism, but look, I know we're coming off as mean in this video, but frankly, we've earned the right to just be straight up.
Considering that we championed this show for so very long, and it seems that our input, the things that we praised about it, the things we liked about it, are not even the priorities of the writers, and that's fine.
But we don't have to like it.
Yeah, we don't have to like it, and right now it seems like Helluva Boss is sort of protected in this bubble where, even the slightest amount of criticism towards it earns the ire of a fan base that does not want to hear even genuine, constructive, sincere criticism from people who, for the most part, would be into it and would like what it was going for. I don't want to name any names because to implicate them in our nonsense would be a great disservice to these people, but there are creators that I respect on Twitter who also feel this hesitancy to even talk about this show because of some of the responses that they've got. And I don't think that's fair, because what that leads to is genuine critique being lumped in with the irrational haters who are just as extreme as this show's defenders.
We were actually really delighted with the response that the last video had. There were a few bad eggs, as you're going to get with any YouTube video, but on the whole, we found the audience response from the kind of Dire Gentleman fandom and the wider YouTube community to be incredibly measured and mature, and even if you didn't necessarily agree with all the points we had, I would genuinely say 95% of the people who engaged directly with the YouTube video did so in a mature and respectful fashion, which we always appreciate. But I think to kind of cut to the core of what the title of this video is, it doesn't feel like there is any meaningful momentum. It feels like whether this show is described as something that is heavily serialized or heavily episodic simply becomes fluid based on how someone is criticizing it. It's honestly very similar to the final days of BBC Sherlock fans. The real diehards among the fandom would bend themselves over backwards to be like, no, this is why you're wrong, this is why it's actually gonna get good, and why, like, there's great stuff on the horizon, while the show continues to just kind of spin its wheels, indulge in hackish fanfic tropes and maudlin, over-the-top melodrama.
Exactly, because there is this platonic ideal of the great Helluva Boss episode that could exist. And someday, to the true believers, it inevitably will. And if we live in their reality, it will be too little too late, but you're welcome to continue to true believe. As for us, we were introduced to Stryker as a nuanced character who gave Blitz genuine temptation. Blitz, who was this person who wanted to succeed at all costs, to fight back against the authorities, to really rise up in the world and make his mark. If he had done it Stryker's way, as Stryker was presented in that episode, to use these heaven weapons to take down a Goetia, and all he would have to sacrifice is the person he was closest to, which his ways of being, his methods of interpersonal connection, his prickly nature would have made him lose that relationship anyway. That's the temptation. That was the character arc. But here, Blitz and Stryker don't even meet. Blitz is off in a plot cul-de-sac where Luna doesn't even get any lines. She's basically not even a character. It almost felt like they were taking her to that office to euthanize her because she basically wasn't even anything.
I would have liked that. That would have been ballsy.
I think that would have actually gotten something out of me. This show desperately needs stakes because it needs stakes or some reason why the characters are doing what they're doing. The characterization of Moxie and Millie has gotten so thin that they are now doing each other's bits. In this episode, Millie was the one getting information through conversation with a person, while Moxie was stabbing a bunch of people, even though it's established that Moxie is more of a marksman than he is a melee combatant. And also that Millie has always been the more fighty of the two, and Moxie has been the more diplomatic. They've become such one two-headed character. They're now this soup of character traits, most of which are Moxie's because Millie doesn't have much to go on there and never has. And the idea that this is due to some partitioning of gender roles between Spindlehorse properties is the most baffling. Any writer or any person who looks at that as legitimate writing process should understand that that is the definition of an excuse. You can't just write a demographic of people poorly because you're focusing on another.
This show doesn't improve. It just gives you myriad increasingly dumb and bizarre excuses for why you can't criticize it. And I think possibly the stupidest one we've ever received. I don't know if Vivzy ever directly said this, but this is so don't quote me on that, but this is something that fans of the show have reached out to say to us as an excuse. They've said that Vivzy said that Helluva Boss is her show for focusing on male characters, while Has-Been Hotel is their show for focusing on female characters. Which, if that isn't stupid enough on the face of it for you, let's be real. The writing of the Has-Been Hotel pilot, and I would speculate most of the show itself, is gonna be dominated by Angel Dust and Alistair, because they just have more development and lines than any of the female characters.
Yeah, maybe it's there's no excuse whatsoever for just completely underwriting any character and to throw it back specifically to, oh, well, Millie's underwritten because this show doesn't care about women. That's not really the defense you think it is, whoever is peddling that. And here's the thing, apart from all of that, the fact that Stolas getting injured for the first time after being, nerfed by an MCU tier blessed rope plot device, and then ending up fully conscious in the hospital, reading Blitz's text messages to give us that flash on screen of, see, you were all crazy for thinking that they didn't address the Aussies drama. Here it is, several episodes later, in a split-second text message. That's the same thing as character development. He's a little bit hurt, but, he'll recover, and now, like, Stryker has no reason to kill him anyway. Just nebulously bring him back to Stella alive, which he's going to be next to Stella alive because this divorce plotline will never end.
Yeah, I think that really sums it up. The show is wheel spinning on its plots with no real believable progression or changes to the status quo. The characters all feel like they've basically completed their arcs and are just in the middle of Flanderization, where instead of progression, we're just getting backstory. The show has a criminally cringeworthy over-reliance on "my dad doesn't believe in me" that just feels like the most, like, bottom-tier, like, Disney Pixar shit.
And you know what? You were spot on in making the seasonal rot comparison, because here's the thing. I have watched episodes of SpongeBob for our other show, SpongeBob Boys, that suck and are worse than any Helluva Boss episode, but they feel worse to me because I give a shit about SpongeBob and Patrick and Mr. Krabs and Squidward. When I watch Helluva Boss now, I just think of how I almost cared about these people.
I think on a final note, I've got to say, man, I don't want to know if you feel the same way. Every time we watch another episode of this, and that opening card comes up, the for mature audiences only feels like more of a bad joke.
And whoever those mature audiences are, I hope you continue to enjoy the show. Meanwhile, we're going to return to our palace of immaturity, and we'll see the rest of you in the near future.